And good afternoon from Philadelphia. Frank here with another edition of UFO News Network Sunday on a Sunday, and sometimes it is better to be lucky than good. And I think we're lucky today to have our special guest along with us. Chant, Hannah, why don't you bring him on in? Thanks for coming on, Stevie, there. Yeah. What happened here? Uh-oh. Yeah. Yeah, some big news. Apparently, there is going to be a full 1 hour special on ABC Network tonight featuring a full-hour interview between George Stephanopoulos and our president, Donald Trump. I don't think we have to go into too much detail on who he is for the listeners. And one of the topics that's going to be covered, and we've already seen a bit of a snippet from this, is UFOs. Steve, this is maybe historic, is it not? Okay.
From that era, the Rockefeller Initiative, which is very important, and there's plenty of information about on the net that Podesta spoke to the issue at the National Press Club October 22nd, 2002. So that's like, what, 5 years after Clinton leaves office. But after he left the White House, Stephanopoulos went right to the news, at ABC News, and quickly was a big player there and arose to be one of their absolute top people. He may even be in charge of the news, I'm not sure. Where he has been since 1997. So we're talking, 22 years. Now, all that time, George Stephanopoulos knew about the Rockefeller Initiative. He knew what happened back then. He knew that there was a serious effort to try to get things out. He knew that his boss was stonewalled and so forth. Then, during the campaign of 2016 to 2018, 2014, 15, and 16. You know, our campaigns are long these days. But the campaign 2015, 2016, his former boss's wife is running for the presidency. And I went to Washington and started working the story heavily and started generating news stories about the fact that there's a strong connection between Hillary Clinton and her political team, her husband, and so forth, Podesta, to the ET issue, and she's running for president, it's the leading candidate, and by God, she probably should be talking about that. But they didn't want it. They weren't going to talk about it. But I got the news story in play, and I had I had a publicist that's working for me. She's one of the top people in town. She knows everybody. We got that story going, and once it got going, it took off. And eventually, 400 articles were written about her connection to the ET issue that put enough pressure on them that she spoke to the issue a number of times in controlled settings. So did her husband. So did Podesta. I think 11 times total. And some of these were tweets still. And that generated more news. That's what helped to drive the news coverage. They didn't want to do that. They wanted to stay completely low until she got into the White House, at which point she was going to disclose. And during that entire 2 years, George Stephanopoulos over at ABC News, knowing the whole history, never interviewed them or asked them a question about it, even when he was a debate moderator. He didn't bring it up. Wow. I guess he didn't think that the extraterrestrial issue, her connection to it, the national security implications was sufficient enough to be news. So then she loses, and then she and her husband and Podesta do not basically stay away from this issue. But Podesta is now getting back into it because things are moving along very quickly. Again, Stephanopoulos does nothing until finally he brings up the question to Donald Trump. So I have to be, I don't like to be a cynic, but I would love to have lunch with George Stephanopoulos, which I assure you will never happen, and say, George, can we review the last 24 years, if you don't mind? Because I'm a little confused about your approach to this issue and your role as a top journalist in America. In any event, Donald Trump basically said he'd been briefed, apparently, about the recent big story that evolved from the New York Times articles, the To the Stars Academy, mostly about the Navy pilots. Apparently, he'd been told something. He was asked if about the UFO extraterrestrial life. He said he didn't think so, or he doesn't know. And I think that's about it. I'm not surprised at that answer. I think it's going to generate some media, a little bit, but I don't think it's going to go anywhere. But it might. It's hard to predict on something like this. He did make a statement, but it was a contrary statement, basically. And there's no indication he has been given a full briefing on this issue. I'm absolutely certain that has not happened. So we'll have to wait and see on this.
Steve, what makes you certain about that?
Certain about what?
What you just said, that he hasn't been given a full briefing.
If he had been given a full briefing on the extraterrestrial issue, there'd be indications. There would be the entire Washington, D.C. now is a giant leaking sieve. Everything comes out here, there, and everywhere else. If he had been given a heavy briefing on that, we would have found out. Right. And then there's the case that, based upon everything I know about the current situation, it's inconceivable to me that the White House, that the military intelligence complex would have given him a full briefing. So 100% certain, no. Let's just go with 99.98, okay?
Okay, got it. Okay. And the meeting that he had on it, is there any way of finding out who might have been there?
Yeah, it could have been nothing more than he supposedly gets intelligence briefings every day, but he doesn't take them. I don't know how many he gets, if in any now. I don't know. But somebody, he has a national security advisor, somebody let him know that there's these news stories out there about Navy pilots reporting, seeing events, and also that the Navy had made an adjustment to the protocols on reporting and something like that. And probably not much more than that. So some researchers may jump on this and really push it. That's their prerogative. From the standpoint of the disclosure process right now, I don't see it. There's much bigger things happening than that.
Okay. And one thing that I did like about what he did have to say was, well, I think my great pilots would know, our great pilots would know. So he seems to be backing the witnesses there. I like that. I like that in the statement.
Yeah, that's a positive. But then when asked about the extraterrestrial life issue, he basically throws out a negative. In other words, he doesn't have a position on this. He doesn't have knowledge about this. He doesn't have a view about this. This is not on his list of things that compel him. And if that changes, well, I'm sure we'll be having discussions about that in the future.
Got it. So that'll be at 8 o'clock tonight. And do you have any word on if this particular topic goes deeper? Because I think this snippet was basically a teaser for the full 1 hour interview. Do we know or not know that it goes any further than that? Just the little teaser that we've already seen? Or do you think they're going to go into a little bit more depth there?
We don't know. I'm going to put my money on that there's almost nothing, very little more than that. It's a very brief thing.
Okay.
Probably came, and they always come right at the end of an interview. It's always like the last thing that they do. Okay, we're about done now. Let me just one more thing. What do you think about extraterrestrials? It happens that way all the time. If it comes earlier than that, I'd be intrigued. But again, I invite people as they watch this interview to understand George Stephanopoulos, top journalist at ABC News, has sat on the E.T. Clinton connection, doing nothing, saying nothing, doing no reporting for basically 23. Well, no, that's not true. Since he went to the news in 97. So we're talking for 22 years. And so now he brings this question up. Well, I guess he thinks there's some news there, but you need to understand, he knows so much more. Right. Is back down. And so this all comes out of the heading of, look, the truth embargo is built on thousands and thousands of politicians who don't want to go there because it could be a problem for me. Journalists who are going, probably shouldn't go there. Government says there's nothing there. All right. Witnesses don't want to disrupt their lives, maybe have non-disclosure agreements. Academics who go, well, I probably could maybe investigate this or maybe teach it. No, that could be a problem for me. It's built on thousands of people doing that.
Okay,
that's how you get a truth embargo.
I'm glad you brought that up because Rich Hoffman actually wanted to ask you a few questions regarding a little bit of what you just said. And here's a statement he said and then a few questions. And that is, political lobbying is a good thing. We need to have people like Harry Reid who value the scientific study to help make a change in the attitudes of more than just the Navy or the DOD to tackle this. The FAA needs to get involved in commercial pilots to report. We need to also have academia remove their obstructions in allowing students to study this and publish papers. We need to get NASA to alter their attitude. If you want a holistic perspective on this, the attitudes of government overall needs to be altered. How are you going to go about this? How are you going about doing this?
Me?
Yes, and then he says, if you were structuring a single governmental body as the lead for this study, where would you place it? National Academy of Sciences, considering it is indeed a worldwide phenomena and that we now have openly stated our position to the world, would now be the time to have the UN tackle this? What is the response on a world level to our announcements? Are you as lobbyists leveraging Harry Reid or others who are having successes in getting political traction?
Okay, no problem. Well, we got, 11 questions there? That should be let me put that all into a giant ball of string. All the things that he said that we needed, that's what we wanted for 70 years, and certainly since 91. And I've been doing what I could to have all of that happen. Absolutely. Up until Chase Koski registers lobbyist in Washington. Good for her, the second one to do so. And has been up on the Hill doing some stuff. I look forward to getting together with her when I return to Washington soon, when I can raise enough money to do that. So what, 2 lobbyists in 24 years. Never been paid a penny of salary, of course. None of the major lobby firms will touch it. Massive businesses, pharmaceuticals, oil, and everything else spend cumulatively hundreds of millions of dollars lobbying Congress. So, and a truth embargo has been formally in place for 70 years. So the idea, how could a citizen activist movement with very little money, certainly no money to give to politicians to get themselves elected, changed one of the most significant policies in American history and one of the most classified areas in American history. Well, you do it by persistence. You pound on the door year after year after year, which they will not acknowledge, they won't acknowledge, they won't come to the door, but you keep pounding on it until finally they get a little irritated enough and they start looking out the windows and thinking, maybe we should do something. Now, at any time in this last 22 years, there's any number of billionaires that could have jumped in and said, you know, this is pretty damn important. I'm going to fund major efforts to change the government's policies on this. Only one so far has done that.
You're talking about Bigelow or Rockefeller?
No, I'm talking about Lawrence Rockefeller. And the tragedy of Rockefeller is that he was knowledgeable of the subject, was into the subject. He helped out John Mack. He helped out Danny Sheehan. He helped out, I think he also provided funds to Lyndon Moulton Howe, possibly also Colin Andrews and so forth. Not massive monies, but he's helping. And some of the money, I think, was pretty sizable for that time. But he was getting old. And so his big play was the Rockefeller Initiative, which he spent money on, clearly. He brought everybody to the ranch. They had meetings. I'm sure he dropped a lot of money. Plus, he was founding the Human Potential Foundation. But he was getting old. And also a little dementia was setting in. And so he just didn't live long enough to go the next step. And shortly after he died, I got a call from his lawyer because I had sent in a proposal to him to fund the advocacy work, you know. It's like, you know, I'm the political activist. I'm a lobbyist. I could use some funding. And that lawyer was kind enough to call me and say, look, we saw your proposal, and unfortunately, Mr. Rockefeller has died, so we won't be able to follow up on that. Okay. So he wasn't able to do. Well, let me put it this way. Since then, some billionaires have turned up. We have the money to be able to create all the things that Mr. Hoffman would like to see, in the sense that they would drive the process forward to the point of disclosure. Which brings up a very important point. All of those wonderful things that he's talking about, it's a wonderful list, are virtually impossible to achieve without formal disclosure. You got your pre-disclosure world and you got your post-disclosure world. And given the truth embargo, given the fact that the government still maintains there is no phenomena that is of concern. There's nothing there that's a threat. People see things in the sky, so what? That is their position. It is still their position. And they are sitting on massive amounts of evidence and information, and thousands of people are still under non-disclosure agreements that are not going to talk, not because they're threatened necessarily, because they're patriots and they believe that they should honor all their agreements. So the embargo is a lid over a massive amount of stuff, right, that is kept from us. Without that embargo ending, without the government finally acknowledging, yes, there's an extraterrestrial presence, being able to get the funding and the public support to create all of those things, getting it taught in the schools, getting the press fully engaged, independent research project, a complete review of all the research that's ever been done by the citizen science research activist movement, one of the most important movements in the history of the human race. I appreciate the To the Stars Academy. They just recently arrived, love everything they're doing, and totally support them. But behind the To the Stars Academy is 70 years of citizen science activists pursuing this issue into the headwind of the government's embargo, getting no money for it, paying out of their pocket, in order to keep this thing going so it wouldn't be completely subsumed into the black world. Without that, you wouldn't have what we're having now. And so once disclosure takes place, be assured that to the extent financial...
I could hear him. By the way, Dr. Michael Paul Masters did say something for you that he wanted me to read to you. And he said, I got a message from Steve Bassett on the book tour last month where he mentioned a new program they started called Academics for Disclosure or something like that. Mm-hmm. Might be nice to hear him speak a little bit more about that. It was definitely something I was interested in learning more about once he mentioned it.
Sure. I'll get to that in just a sec. In terms of what I expect, one of the things I expect to happen post-disclosure is that there will be immediate pressure for a cabinet position on this. The name of it, who knows? It could be the Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs or Department of Extraterrestrial. I don't know what it'll be called. Maybe the DOD may say, no, we can handle it here. And the public should immediately say, right? And so there'll be a cabinet level position of a person that is devoted to dealing with this issue. And they may create a whole separate entity, or they may try to work it out of NASA. But more than likely, it'll be a separate entity, because this isn't just about science. The implications of disclosure is massively political. This is a very political issue, has been all along. So I expect that to happen. I'm certainly prepared to put my name in the ring for cabinet position, right? I'm sure they'll vet me thoroughly.
Yeah, but then you'll clam up on us, Steve, and not tell us anything.
You won't be able to do your show anymore.
That's right.
So there we have. Now, in terms of the other program, yeah, I appreciate Mr. Messers bringing it up. Nice of him to do that. Look, I tossed out a while back a new idea that I have, a new project that I want to pursue. It isn't really. It's still just in the nascent stage. It's not nothing. There's no front for it yet. I do have a page on my website, paradigmresearchgroup.org, that basically is a splash page for it. This is a challenging project, which may become moot if we get disclosure. But it's a simple idea. It's based on Richard Gage's Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth concept, where they got like 3,000 architects and engineers that basically said that some of the physical aspects of the government's explanation was baloney, though the government still completely clings to its explanation, because that's what governments do. They don't like to be found to be wrong. They will take being wrong to the grave. I get it. Okay. So the idea was academics for disclosure. One of the greatest intellectual failures in the history of the human race, as far as I'm concerned, and there have been many intellectual failures, is the complete submission of American academia to the truth embargo from day one. I get it. In the early days, 40s, 50s, Cold War, 62, Cuban Missile Crisis, all that, this issue was absolutely verboten. It was contained and more aggressively maintained, I suppose, meaning that they were a little harsher on those that decided that they wanted to spill the beans. But still nothing. I mean, complete submission, virtually. Then after the truth embargo, after the Cold War ends, they still continue to submit, so that there hasn't been proper courses taught on it ever, except a few vanity courses some professors have done, a few that are now, I think, shut down. That's, you know how many colleges we have? 5,000? You know how many professors have come through those in 70 years? Millions. And so this entire issue, where the evidence is just mounting and mounting and mounting, and it's global and it's everywhere and it's all over the internet, the entire academic community say, we don't want to teach. We want to touch that. It'll happen when it happens. But we don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers. Plus, there's all that research money we get from the government grants and so forth. We don't want to, risk that. And so they basically just stood down for 70 years. That is not just stood down on, I don't know, some minor controversial issue in quantum mechanics, on the most important issue scientifically and politically in the history of mankind. That's what they stood down on. Okay, so academics for disclosure, I was going to start contacting people. I know a number already, and I've also put out a statement, get in touch with me. A couple of people have, but I haven't pushed it very hard, to see if I could get a number of individuals, academics, and the criteria that I'm using is very specific. It's very careful. Is anyone who has a PhD or MD, or whether they're teaching or not, and anyone who is currently teaching above the high school level, college level, regardless of their degree, to sign on to a basic statement, which I believe is something to the effect is that I am convinced that I'm convinced there's an extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race, and that that disclosure, a formal disclosure of this to the American people, needs to take place. That's the basic statement. So it's easy for me to do that. However, before I can go public, I'm going to have to get every one of them to sign a hold harmless agreement. And that's what's holding it up right now. Plus, I'm deep into these conferences. I've got AlienCon coming up. I've got 2 lectures, 2 panels. So I just haven't pursued it. But that's the biggest barrier. In other words, they're going to have to sign a hold harmless agreement that if by signing on, and I wouldn't go public with it until I had probably at least 100. So it's a group. Any damage it does to their career, to their position, and so forth, that they would have to hold Paradigm Research Group harmless on that. And I wish I didn't have to do that, but I still have to do that, and we'll have to do that up until the point there's disclosure. After disclosure, wouldn't even need the program. Though I assure you, after disclosure, I'm going to be talking a lot about the academic community and this failure on their part, and how they need to make up for that by really getting on their bicycle and pedaling very fast and start creating departments across the country to address this issue and teach it and investigate it thoroughly, and everything new that comes. I'll be, leading the charge on that and other charges.
Now, Steve, you had mentioned earlier that some more stuff is going to be coming down the pike that is going to be very good. Can you give us any kind of a heads up on that?
Well, the circumstances now are fairly straightforward to me, because I've been doing nothing but follow this for 22 years obsessively, to the exclusion of everything else, right? Which makes me, in some respects, unbelievably boring. But the point is that the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences, which announces its reality and puts up its website October 11th, 2017, with this name that I think is deliberately, what's the word I'm looking for? Soft, right? It's a fun, kind of soft thing. The To the Stars. Oh, wow. Everybody wants to go to the stars of Arts and Academy of Arts and Sciences. It's like it's almost a subsidiary of the National whatever, the Academy of Arts and Sciences, the film group, whatever the name, I forget. And it does have a media component. So it's kind of a soft name. Okay, cool. And it has a CEO who is not a former intelligence officer, not a former high-level political operative on the Hill, or a scientist dealing in genetics or anything else. He's a autodidact musician, very successful musician, very successful businessman too, who is huge into the issue, who has been talking to them, and they sort of came together with a I guess an agreement, a similar idea. Like, yeah, we need to do something, and I think I know why they did it. And so this comes out. So that's Tom DeLonge is the CEO. He's the quarterback of the team. Luis Elizondo is I think the chief interface, without question, to the world on this issue. This was a milestone, game-changing deal. This was perhaps and I used to run marathons. This is the last turn as you're coming into town after running 25 miles. And you make the turn, and now you can virtually see way out there, not too far out there, but the banners at the finish line and some of the people standing around. That's kind of what it is for the disclosure process and the disclosure movement. And since then, everything that's happening is essentially us finishing the race. We're now heading toward disclosure. It's only a question of how long it's going to take to get to the finish line, which we can now see. It has triggered all kinds of things. One of those things is pushback. A lot of pushback. Totally expected. The government has been lying and misrepresenting this issue for 70 years, undermining, damaging reputations, threatening people, and along the way has also conducted a number of outrageous wars, killing hundreds of thousands of people, and plenty of other things which are just totally outrageous that we should never be doing, given our values. And people don't trust it. The trust in the Congress, I think, once hit 6%. Hitler had a better trust ratio than that from the American people. So it's like they don't trust. So out comes this group, many of which have worked in the deepest, darkest levels of the military intelligence complex, suddenly saying, we want to bring information to you about ETs. And a whole bunch of people, not ETs, I can't say that, but about this phenomena, a whole bunch of people saying, you expect us to believe you? And so they push back. They're trying to find anything wrong with it, and they're pounding on it. I kind of don't. Some people, I know that George Knapp is totally outraged by this. I disagree with George. I mean, George is one of the top people in the field, one of the most important, solid people out there, has been for years. But I disagree with him on this. You would fully expect that to be the case, and
it's part of the game. It's part of the game,
and it needs to hold up to that challenge and not whine about it too much. And so you have that happening. But the fact is, the only reason that we haven't already hit the finish line, all right, meaning we turned the corner October 11th, 2017, and the only reason we didn't head straight up that last road there at City Street and cross the finish line is the political developments of the election of 2016, which is unprecedented on just about every level you can imagine. It is incited probably 4 or 5 constitutional crises. It is completely consuming the media, the Congress, and now we have a new election starting 2.5 years before the election, and 20-some candidates. They'll be campaigning endlessly until everybody will be fleeing to Australia, hoping to never see another political candidate again, at least American political candidate. And so what they triggered is now it's like light passing through a viscous medium. It slows it down. And so it's like it put ankle weights on everybody in this field. So we're now heading to the finish line, but it's slowed down. But be assured that if you pay attention, you see where it's going. And so the New York were made some really. Yeah, we're going through the internet here. Those New York Times articles triggered nearly 400 articles, related articles to ATIP and To the Stars Academy, which are all linked on my website, paradigmresearchgroup.org. Just go to the print media archive. 400. They're all earmarked. You can see them. I've got them flagged. You can read them and take hours. There's that. And then, of course, the History Channel, which knew what was going on, filmed them with the intent that they were going to do a program that would then highlight this. That's now out there. History Channel launches the Project Blue Book program. They're going to have a second season of that. And then the other thing that's happening is that now that this thing is out at this level, in this way, the wrappings on the package are just really loosening quickly. And one of the most important parts of that package is witnesses. There are thousands of witnesses in the military who are either witness to direct events, sightings, firsthand, secondhand, or were involved in the program itself or knew about it in other ways. There are thousands, either both in and retired from the military. And virtually all of them, with the occasional exception, have remained silent, honoring whatever agreements and understandings they have. That now things are changing. And so what the To the Stars launch is starting to do is making it easier for more witnesses to come forward. And you're starting to see that already. Another pilot here, another pilot there. Now they're interviewing people off the Princeton. Who knows who could turn up, right? As people start to realize, hey, it's okay now. This clearly these other people are, and the Pentagon isn't, having a. So that's significant, and also, I would fully expect as the package continues to be, the wrappings continue to loosen on the disclosure package, or the embargo package rather, documents to turn up. Why not? And so recently, some documents turned up, and these are already creating a significant controversy. And these are documents that purport to be notes from a very well-known scientist by the name of Dr. Eric Davis, involving Will Miller. Now, I have not reviewed them yet. I am not on top of this. Richard Dolan is, and others, and they are very significant documents, which have a known past. In other words, the meetings they're referring to, they were announced and talked about all the way back in 2002, 3, 4. Stephen Greer was involved in that. He was involved in a lot of things. A lot of people think Stephen wasn't involved in these things. They're wrong. He was. He was involved in a lot of things. Oh
yeah, we've got a lot. We got a lot on this that we're going to really focus on. At the end of the show, after we wrap up with you.
So there's a history here. The people are known. So my first reaction is, yeah, I'm going to bet this is the real deal, and I'm dying to find out more. However, again, there are plenty of people in this field who are frustrated and very distrustful, and they're going to try to prove it a hoax. Fine, that's good. Go at it. No problem. The thing is, try to be cool about it. Try to be civil. It's like, hey, this is just evidence. We're trying to get to the bottom of things. If it's a disinfo hoax, in other words, if it is, there's two ways. There's only three possibilities here with any document, including this one, these documents, 15 pages. It is, in fact, the absolute real deal that someone has gotten permission to or is willing to allow out. Two, it is a hoax perpetrated by somebody with too much time on their hands, who has a bad worldview and maybe not a particularly nice personality, that decided to create a hoax because, hell, there's a lot of people paying attention and I'll get a lot of attention. Or three, it is an actual formal disinfo effort on the part of those within the Department of Defense that are opposed to what the To the Stars Academy is doing, and they're throwing out this to maybe muddy the waters. And that includes some recent debunking that's been done from some, quote, journalists who've written some pretty nasty pieces about this, which I suspect could be actual government-backed disinfo, elements of the government-backed disinfo. These are the only three possibilities. And so we're going to find out. I know this. There are two key people here. I forget his rank. It was Admiral or whatever, Will Miller and Eric Davis.
Commander
Will Miller and Eric Davis.
And so, Admiral Wilson. Admiral Thomas
Admiral
Wilson.
Okay, and they need to be contacted and find out. Ask them directly.
Yeah, we had contacted. We went over this with Michael Hall, and we contacted Commander Miller Monday and Tuesday. So we had a lot of feedback from him. Eric Davis is basically through Hal Puthoff, essentially. Said no comment. They are not going to nobody's contacted Wilson yet.
Okay. So all three of these people have to be contacted. We have to get their statements. And when we do, we'll have a much better idea of the validity of these documents. We'll probably find it out pretty quickly. However, and this is something that people forget, when you are talking to people who are inside and involved in any aspect of this issue, who were under national security, had national high security clearances, and almost certainly national security non-disclosures, you cannot assume that what they say, if they say anything about something like this, is true.
Exactly.
That's just the way it is. You have three options if you are one of those people, and there are thousands of them. Right? And unless somebody has been one of them, you just don't know what it's like. I've never been one of them, but I have a sense of what it's like. People that have never been in that position just assume a lot of things. The ignorance is not helpful there. You have a high national security clearance. You've signed very powerful non-disclosure agreements. Your job is protecting the country. This issue in the embargo is clearly under the manner of national security, and you are now attached to an event or a document, and you're approached by a journalist. You got three options. You say, absolutely, that's what happened. I can't speak to this, right? Actually, there's four options. That's what happened. I'm unable to speak to this. I have no idea what you're talking about, or completely lie or deny what you're told. Those are the four options you have.
The problem I have with what you're talking about is that anybody can make up a document.
Of course. And
they can go ahead and put whatever drama they want in there with hot topic related stuff and conspiracy laden stuff, and then go ahead and attach your name, anybody's name to it.
Of course, yeah.
And sure. then if they so happen to include somebody that has top secret clearance or whatever terminology you want to use regarding the individual having access to classified material, or if they happen to be if they happen to have worked in the capacity of intelligence for the Pentagon or other areas of our government or other governments around the world, they can then be accused of having been involved in the document by virtue of them having had denied involvement with the alleged document. So then there's a circular discussion that takes place, and it's not fair to those people.
Chant, Let me tell you something I know you already know. We're now living in the age of the internet. And what is fair? The definition, or rather the range of what is fair and what is not fair is not the same. We're in a new world, and we're going to have to adjust to it. The things that you can do with documents, with postings, with just pure libel, whatever, hoaxes, is now at an unprecedented level that most people 100 years ago would be completely, their mind would be blown if they told them that. The most recent development, this has come out about 6 days ago. I love this one. Welcome to the future. I know, I tell you, the millennials. I envy the fact that they're young, but on the other hand, I'm thinking, boy, you have no idea what you're heading into. Is that there is now AI technology available that can take a speech by anybody, any politician, anybody, and by adjusting it in various very simple ways, you can then overlay a completely different speech by a voice actor who can mimic that person's voice, and it makes it look exactly as if that person is saying exactly that. So someone can make up a video showing some movie star giving a 20-minute presentation about how they've been a secret member of the American Nazi Party, right? And so in order to counter this, YouTube and some of these others are now scrambling to hire top people to come up with a counter AI program that is able to examine any video and find out if that manipulation is taking place. That is where we are now with respect to this document. In this case, I know that can happen, and there's all matters of mischief that can take place. In this case, we have living people directly attributed to the document. And so you go to those people and you get their response, and you'll know pretty quickly if it's true. And if somebody says, I won't speak about it, that's not a denial. If somebody says, no, it's not true, didn't happen, but they're clearly under significant national security non-disclosure agreements, you can't assume that what they're saying is the truth. And we've got 3 people here, so I think we're going to get to the bottom of this one, and hopefully the public statements from these people will be made public. The statements will be made public, so that we can assess them on their face. Meaning, all right, this person says it's true. What's our feeling about that statement? Or this person says it's not true. What's our feeling about the statement? As opposed to just trying to speculate because some document turned up about a bunch of dead people that happened 40, 50 years ago. So I'm not worried that this is not going to flesh out. But I think anyone who takes an immediate position one way or the other that it's absolutely the legit or absolutely a hoax is premature.
Yeah, and really quick, Steve, we did that this week. Obviously, we contacted Commander Wilson, and he said what he said. We went over it in great detail Tuesday night. And also, we're continuing to do some follow-up. I've got some interesting, and that doesn't really prove anything one way or the other, but it is interesting additional facts that Chant and I are going to discuss when we wrap up with you. And I mean, that's where it's at now. Obviously, Richard Dolan had gone ahead and contacted Hal Puthoff. And, just because somebody does deny it, it doesn't, because they're not going to comment on anything purported to be connected to national security, doesn't mean that they're necessarily admitting that the documents are true either. I mean,
well, let me give you a perfect example of that. When the To the Stars Academy was launched, there's some of the researchers in the field who did exactly what you expect them to do. They got in touch with the Pentagon. Meaning the Pentagon front office, right? Mm-hmm. The spokespeople. And they asked them about it. And the spokespeople basically said contradictory statements, meaning, no, I don't know this, whatever. Because for whatever reason, and I think I know why, they were not let in on what was going to happen. Remember, the To the Stars Academy is not a formal program. At least publicly, a formal program of the Department of Defense. It just happens to be comprised of people that have worked all throughout the military intelligence community. However, people that follow this issue know that it is, in fact, a semi-formal, meaning that they are backed by people inside the DOD. The DOD is fully aware of it, as is the CIA. And if the DOD and the CIA wanted it to end, they would end it. but they've chosen not to, which is extremely telling. But because it's not a full formal project, the front office of the Pentagon didn't need to be informed, and so people went and got those statements, and they threw their hands up and say, "Oh, this is phony." Look, people have to understand that the management of the extraterrestrial issue is huge. Is a great deal involved, a huge history. It's incredibly complicated. There's all kinds of national security rules and regulations and laws and everything else, and that we are just see the little tip of the iceberg. And so we're trying to put the pieces together and make it all fit and so forth. No, we don't have even vaguely enough knowledge. We just basically have to go with what we're seeing, what's happening, vet it as best we can, but don't jump to too many conclusions, because what's happening is it's simply part of a much bigger agenda. The ultimate agenda is disclosure.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in. Finish up, please, by all means.
Well, the last thing I want to say is that, look, Eric Davis is eventually going to speak to this. All right. Eric Davis is posting constantly. I'm getting stuff. I'm part of the Sarfati email list, and I'm getting things. He's posting all the time. So what's happening right now, if Davis is not saying anything right now, he has a reason for that. He's probably waiting for any number of things. Maybe he's holding off to do an interview. Who knows? But the idea that Dr. Davis is not going to speak to this document, no, he will. And if he comes out and completely endorses it and says that, yes, these are my notes, then that's it. Case closed.
Yep. And you had talked about pushback earlier on, and there was some pushback in the media, a story in The Intercept that you took some serious issue with. So you were saying before we went on, It's kind of died down a little bit, but you wanted to at least talk about it a little bit.
I don't want to beat this one up. There was The Intercept. There was an article in The Intercept, which I follow The Intercept. It's a very important investigative journalist operation with plenty of money behind it. And it's got Pulitzer Prize people involved, both Glenn Greenwald, who is a strong critic of the United States, Laura Poitras, and they're doing the kind of investigative journalism that, God, I wish MSNBC and ABC would do, CNN. So I respect them. And so this article turns up on the front page. And it's essentially an attack piece on Luis Elizondo and the whole ATIP thing in general. This journalist, quote unquote, thinks he's got an angle, thinks he's found something. And so he writes basically what is a debunker piece. It's demeaning, it's insulting, it's condescending. It's all the kind of stuff that Phil Klass used to do years ago. And others, but mostly Klass was the most famous for it. And it was like it just popped in out of the 70s. And it pissed me off. So I publicized a very strong response to this article and invited people to tear it up, rip it up, show it for what it is. But it was so ridiculous and so easily proven to be wrong that it died down. My biggest concern was that it might get picked up by some of the major papers or even the television operations, and then it could create what I would consider, a real pushback, but it really hasn't. And so it's one of those things now. It's gone. I don't expect more in that area. But I did mention in my statement that given everything else that's happening and given the pace of disclosure process picking up and all that's taking place, we're aware of, knowing that there are opponents to this whole thing, and there are plenty of people with some high position in the military intelligence complex, certainly the DOD and CIA, who feel that the American people should never be told the truth about the ETs or confirms, at least not in their lifetime. And they're opposed to it. And so it was not, and since this didn't just turn up on some blog somewhere or one of those fringe sites, but a major investigative journalist site, it thought it maybe was commissioned by insiders to be pushback, right? Standard disinfo debunking pushback. Don't know, haven't seen anything similar to it lately. But I will say this: look, this is a 70-year truth embargo on a major issue that has frustrated huge numbers of people for a long time. And so everything that the To the Stars Academy is doing is going to be heavily engaged, and is going to be positives and negatives, and there's no way around it. And I think they should embrace that. Don't complain about it. It's not your fault. Well, it's not specifically their fault. Well, actually, to some degree, it is. Most of these people have been sitting on this issue most of their life. Most of the people in the To the Stars Academy know that the team that know there's extraterrestrials here. They just can't say that yet because they're under strict rules of engagement. But the rest of us, right, are irritated because the government has played this game out. And so they're going to take some heat. Take it. It's okay. All right. And take it with some grace, because in the end, you're going to win. You're going to win, and you're going to cross the finish line, and Elizondo or Tom DeLonge is going to hold up the Super Bowl trophy. Then we're going to be in the post-disclosure world. Thank God.
And when you're in politics, you really can't take the high road and rise above some of these things. You got to respond. You got to hit back. It's part of the game, you know.
Wait a minute. When you say, are you referring to the To the Stars Academy hitting back?
Well, anybody really, but yeah, them in particular, yes.
No, they shouldn't hit back. I mean,
they should.
Let me put it this way. Look, the high road is the best road to always take. The problem right now is there's so many low roads, you can't find the high road, right? In political, how would you say, conflict, seeking office, whatever. Somebody comes after you, sometimes you've got to hit back. This is not a. This is a disclosure process going on. This is revealing. It's not. There is political implications without question, but it's not a fundamentally political effort. It is in fact kind of like journalism in a sense, investigative journalism going on, and you've got people coming forward and trying to tell the truth. The last thing they want to do is hit back. Hitting back just feeds the opposition, right? What do you got to hide? Why are you so sensitive? If you're a truth teller, you just tell the truth. And there are people out there that don't believe that truth, and they will attack you. Fine. What are you going to do? Spend your whole life arguing with people that haven't figured out that is the truth, and they just want to debate you until the end of time? No. You just keep telling the truth, and people will eventually figure out, that's the truth. And as that process happens, you move further forward. That's the way you deal in something like that. You don't debate every single person that turns up who's got an issue. You don't, and you also don't, but you don't disrespect them. You just acknowledge, okay, you got your point of view, and you go forward. That's the proper way to do this. But hey, I'm not part of that team. And they're not asking for my advice. They're doing pretty well, and overall, I'm fine. I'm fine with what's going on.
Now, we haven't had you on since the show, the TTSA show Unidentified, has premiered. Have you had a chance to watch it, and do you have any thoughts?
Of course.
Before you do that, I would like to go ahead and introduce Chase, and then Steve can go ahead and address that. Chase Klutsky, thank you so very much for having come on the show with us today. She's an author, a forensic investigator, an explorer, and also, Chase, could you also be accurately called an activist?
That would probably be more legitimate than other things I've been called.
Hi, Chase. How are you?
Hi, Steve. It's so good to hear you.
Look, you are a number of things, as am I. You're a lobbyist. You registered. You're a lobbyist. All lobbyists are basically activists. That. What now?
I actually didn't, Steve, and I'll explain that in a moment because.
I'm sorry. I thought you had. I forgive me.
No, because you were right. It was, but to register here in D.C., I was filling out all the paperwork, and I honestly was going to hit send and then decided not to, because my experience personally here is I didn't need it. I'm already talking to some of the right people. Mm-hmm. I'm already gotten my in, and I kind of thought, we're not making money. There's I don't know. It just seemed like a lot of work just for a title, and I haven't needed it, not one time. That lobbyist ID. So
but you did register in a state as a lobbyist, didn't you?
Correct. Oh yeah, I have been.
Do you still have that listing?
Yes.
Then you're a lobbyist. However, I am still the only national extraterrestrial phenomena lobbyist in the world. Hello, hello, hello.
Yeah, you could actually claim being the only registered because I'm inactive. So, that's because I make no money. And when you don't make the money and you're not being paid, but to address that quickly, Steve, they don't know that up here. So when you have that lobby ID and you're approaching as a lobbyist, they don't know you're not making money. They don't know you're not funded. The only people that would know that would be you and the campaign finance office that takes all those reports. So, and keeps us honest. But honestly, it's open. The right people are ready to listen. If you have something legitimate and intelligent to tell them, doors are opening, Steve. You don't need it.
Well, I hope that is true, because if I can raise about 25, maybe 30,000, I'm coming back to D.C. to full-time lobby both the Congress and the media. The reason I have to raise funds is because I do not have unlike many other places, I do not have a supporter in Washington who's capable of providing living space. So I'm going to have to rent, and rent is not cheap in Washington, D.C. And when I get back, you and I will have a long conversation. We'll talk about a lot of things. And so at this point, we'll call you an activist. I call myself a lobbyist, but mostly I'm an activist. I'm really an exopolitical activist, a disclosure activist, and a truth advocate. All of those things. And I would say that's the case with you as well.
I think Frank had actually asked Steve a question about TTSA. Frank, what was that question?
Yeah, about the show.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, let me just mention one more thing to Chase, though, before I answer that. Chase, something you need to know. I just want to mention to you. The lobbying registration is not simply strictly about money. As you know, if you register lobbyist, you do have to make reports on a regular basis. I think it's every 6 months now, but it could be every quarter. And you have to report funds that you might have gotten. You have to report funding that is coming in to fund your lobbying work, and that's fine. They want to know that. But the principal basis for the law is that the government requires that people that are trying to influence government policy by directly engaging members of the Congress or members of the executive branch need to be registered so they know who they are. It is not a money thing. Now, as it happens, in an issue like the extraterrestrial issue, which, as we know, doesn't exist, there is no issue. There's no there, right? So how can you influence somebody about something that doesn't even exist? And so this issue has been marginalized to the point where they're not concerned. Now, if you were up on the Hill without being a registered lobbyist, and you were talking to members of Congress about influencing a vote on whether or not to sanction, say, Saudi Arabia for its actions regarding the assassination of the journalist, and you weren't registered, you can get into hot water. So that's the reason you do it. But this issue is still sufficiently fringe that nobody cares. Just want to make sure you understand that distinction. Okay.
Oh, it's the paperwork's all filled out. All I have to do is hit send and wait for the acceptance. But
wait for the right moment and pop that baby in. And then because I've been telling people for some time now that you were the second now registered lobbyist in the Capitol on this issue. I've been lying to these people.
Oh, you haven't been lying. You haven't. I'm going to hit send and we'll be good. I promise. It's going to happen.
That's all right. I'm not suggesting you do it or not do it. I'm just make sure because you got plenty of things to think about. But at some point maybe you do. Okay. Now in terms of TTSA,
I live here. It's very easy. We were just up there last week. It's and I love every bit of it. Sure. Nope, it's a good idea.
I've been up there many times, and I've talked to people there. I've talked to staffers and so forth, but I knew I couldn't penetrate through to the actual member. I didn't have access to the committee. I just don't have I didn't have the gravitas that someone like Christopher Mellon has. I mean, Christopher Mellon is a major hitter, and they're going to talk to him. I'm just a crazy UFO lobbyist out here trying to represent the people's interest. And as you know, the people's interest is the last thing on the minds of just about everybody in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's about keeping their jobs. And, and the reason that this topic's even made it through the doors is because they talk as though it's a threat. And that is the only way this is ever going to happen. Not that I believe or know or have ever heard anyone from To the Stars Academy say this is all bad and we're expecting an invasion and this is horrible. This is something that had to be put into this discussion exactly this way, or they're not going to get in. And I understood that. Those insiders knew that, and they put this out perfectly. It's amazing.
Let me clarify that a little bit for you, because there is a lot of confusion and I think even some concern on the part of the public as they watch this going forward. There was a time, a long, long time ago in a galaxy far away, when if you had a job and you weren't a what we say, a craftsman or working person, a regular job, office job, you went in, you had a coat and a tie. You put on a nice coat and a tie, decent slacks, nice dress. You went in and you did that. You had to do that in order to work there, right? The threat thing is kind of like that. It's the coat and tie you have to put on to engage in a somewhat of a public setting. So in the public arena, if in any way you're going to engage this issue in a public fashion, that coat and tie, that threat thing is helpful to you. It's not necessary on a purely private basis. In other words, if I'm a Christopher Mellon and I want to go talk to a committee chair, I don't need to call him up and say, I need to talk to you about this issue because the ETs are probably going to invade within the next 6 months and we're all going to be slaves. No. You could say, look, we need to start engaging this issue and what have you. There's time for Congress to get involved. He doesn't have to bring up threat publicly. Right. It's a different matter. And that's their point.
The private conversations, they want to bring this public. So that was my point.
Well,
I understand the private, but they're done with that. They want this to come out.
Well, the threat thing is still there. It was emphasized. It was emphasized repeatedly in the first and second episodes of Unidentified. I think a little bit in the third episode, because again, this is the very public representation of the To the Stars Academy's agenda, into millions of people on History Channel that'll be played and replayed for the rest of the year. You know how History Channel works. And so, but the threat thing, I understand it in the sense that the reason they had to call it the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program is because a lot of people in the Pentagon were going to know about it. I mean, it might have been relatively a secret to the rest of the world, but a lot of people in the Pentagon would know there was this program. And if it was the Advanced Integration Extraterrestrial what's the word? Welcoming program, right? They would go, what the hell are you doing? This is the Pentagon. We don't do that stuff. And so they had to call it that, if only just to not rankle people's feathers or ruffle their feathers. And even now, as they come forward, they know that threat makes it very difficult. The fact that one could say there is anytime you're dealing with something like this, there's a potential threat. Absolutely. If the ETs wanted to do something terrible, they could do it tomorrow. Nothing's stopping them. So there is an implied potential threat, and that's national security at the highest level. What could be more national security than that? Tampering with our nuclear missiles. So that makes it very difficult for the political media and the politicians to just toss it off. Well, maybe there's ETs here, but it's no big deal. Forget about it. Oh no, national security. So they keep that in there to make it more difficult for the politicians to stay back. But ultimately, what will happen is, as the thing gets more embraced, I think the threat thing will fade out. And it's sort of like this process. Now, let's be clear. And maybe, I don't know if you agree with me or not, Chase, but if for some reason this threat thing starts escalating, as we get more revelations, more witnesses coming forward, and suddenly they start talking more and more seriously about, threat, then there's going to be pushback from me. Because that's the one thing that many of the people in the field are very concerned about. And that is that, and we wouldn't be if there wasn't a very long history of this going way back to ancient aliens, right? That we have a permanent war economy and a vast military and intelligence infrastructure that is costing us around $1.2 trillion a year. And there is a lot of temptation there for people inside to go, boy, could we cash in on if we could convince the American public there was a real threat. And just like we could really get some American public on board if we said there was nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. If they play that game with this issue, I'm going to stand in front of the Pentagon and scream my bloody head off, unless they can prove it. I mean, absolutely prove it beyond any reasonable doubt. Trying to turn this into a true threat as part of our national policies and how we deal with it would be, at this point, in my view, probably the single most destructive mistake that any government will have made at any time, past, present. Would be a catastrophe.
Hey, Steve, can you go into some detail as to why that is?
Why it would be a catastrophe?
Why you feel that way, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's like, they lied to us about the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, so we were able to go in and destroy Iraq. Well, Iraq didn't have a chance. It had no chance. The war was over the day it started. And a couple 100,000 people died. God, total number since then, counting all the sanctions, probably 1 million, 1.5 million. Now they want to play the same game with extraterrestrials who have interstellar travel, right? Meaning, let's convince the American people we have to spend trillions of dollars in order to defend us against the evil extraterrestrials. Well, first of all, I don't think it would happen. But if we actually did do this and started, I don't know, firing at everything that every saucer we saw, the extraterrestrials might decide to go, okay, fine, that's the way you want to be, and boom, we're turned into dust. They can destroy our planet anytime they want to. If anybody wants to get into the physics of that, I'm happy to discuss it. But just take my word for it. We have zero chance against extraterrestrials. None. We have less chance against extraterrestrials than a kindergarten class with every kid holding a Glock would have against the Army, the U.S. Army. All right, we have no chance, and so that on its face is incredibly stupid. And then the second thing is we're gonna send hundreds of billions of dollars down a black hole, only to service the permanent war economy. At a point when we are now $22 trillion in debt, and the world is facing enough crisis to keep us busy for the rest of the century. So yeah, on a scale of 1 to 10, that's a 10 of stupidity, stupid government policies based upon a 10,000-year history of war as the alternative to diplomacy.
Okay, well, yes, you did. And actually, I wanted to interject with a question for Chase. Chase, I have a series of questions to ask you. I'm going to go ahead and start with the shortest one from Stacy Wright, Assistant Director of Phoenix MUFON. She asked, what can the local UFO groups do to help them out, meaning lobbyists, yourself and Steve?
My first answer would be call your Congress and senators. Call them and demand that they listen and focus in and become part of that discussion, because it does, especially where they come from. With Phoenix, has a huge UFO legacy of the Phoenix Lights. It's now time that they can effectively call and start demanding action.
Okay, I have another one from Alejandro.
Hang on, I get to respond to that too. Hang on.
I apologize. Sorry, go ahead.
It's okay. Let me get more pragmatic. What can the people out there that are interested in this subject, been following it, they see something happening, what can they do to help? Okay. Not only me or Chase, how about themselves? How about the country? Yes. Feel free to call your congresspeople anytime you want. Send them letters, send them emails, whatever they got on their website. And let them know you're following this is important. Fine, do it plenty. That's fine. Here's what you really need to do. Now I know some people are gonna criticize me for this. It's okay. It's all right. I'm a big boy. Join MUFON. All right? Join MUFON. Why? Our ability to have voice in the post-disclosure world, when the world is going to change in ways we can't even imagine, when the opportunity to modify, reform, and fix some of the infrastructure and nonsense and policies that we have created is going to be never greater than ever. It will be the greatest it's ever been. It's going to be dependent upon the degree to which we have structure. Now, we don't have much structure because we don't have any money. You can't build structure with 50 cents or a couple of bucks. There have been a number of organizations over the years. They come and then they've gone. NICAP, destroyed by the CIA. CUFOS, eventually basically just becomes an archive. But the one that's been with us now since 1969 is MUFON. It's had its ups, it's had its downs, it's made mistakes. The point is, it is the best known, largest organization of people directly interested and engaging this issue in the world. And it's also international. All right? So, if people started joining it by the tens of thousands, it would have the resources and the database and the email list that in the post-disclosure world, people could, through that organization, try to influence government policy. Without that, hey, what are you going to continue sending letters to your congressman in the post-disclosure world for the next 20 years? No. Now, there will be a lot of groups that will form right after disclosure. Everybody's going to jump in. Big money is going to form groups overnight, right? Oh, yeah, this is it. Join this. We're on board. Throw money in it, have all kinds of brick and mortar structure and public relations people. All that will kind of happen. But MUFON has been in this since '69. It has paid its dues. It has gone through thick and thin. It has put up with hell. And it's got a track record here. And we need to support that. We need to support those that have done this and not just forget about them and jump on board the next billionaire's project in the post-disclosure world as everybody tries to cash in on this, which they will in every way possible, post-disclosure. Right? You want to go buy underwear? It's going to have ETs on it. All right. It's going to have alien faces on it because that's how you're going to sell underwear. So you want to do something? Come together. How can you come together? Well, sure. Well, how can you do it? You got to join something. And right now, that's it. To me, that's the one organization that really has the ability to come together and quickly. And I'm sure that as the resources increase and the memberships increase, that issues that people have with it can be fixed, and that the organization would be the best it can be. That's my advice for those out there pre-disclosure heading towards the disclosure event.
Okay, Alejandro Rojas asked where you all think this is going with TTSA, which, Steve, you may have already addressed that, but we'd like to hear how Chase takes on that perspective regarding that question, and what has made them so effective at getting the attention of lawmakers. So I'm going to read that again. Chase, where do you think this is all going with TTSA regarding your lobbying efforts, your and Steve's lobbying efforts, and also what has made you all so effective at getting the attention of lawmakers?
Honestly, To the Stars really opened up a lot of the discussion and the people willing to listen because of movement and activist type pushing from former Senator Reid and some of the others that are known on the Hill, such as Chris Mellon and Hal Puthoff and some of the names. So first they organized a group of top people that the government is comfortable with because they've trained them and worked with them many, many years, decades even. So this is something that's, to me, it was orchestrated perfectly for bringing this out. As far as the lobbying from Steve and I, it really is, getting to the right people at the right time. And these doors are open. We're talking to subcommittees, a threat assessment subcommittee. When you first get here as a lobbyist, I didn't have Steve with me, unfortunately. So I've, taken a couple bumps and wasted my time in a few areas, such as trying to reach the Office of Science and Technology. You think that would be a good place to start connecting and having a relationship of information. They can hook you up, tell you where to go. Not even close. It's not how DC works. So you really spent probably the first year just getting this down, figuring it out. How do we get to some of this? And you also have to know even how the subcommittees work and how they get their information. So when they're getting their information from Joint Command, it's not just the Department of the Navy, it's not just the Nimitz video and stuff. We have to remember there's even, big influential entities such as DTRA right here in DC, which is Defense Threat Reduction Agency. So there's all these combined. So by really being able to work some of your military contacts, working with kind of that momentum that To the Stars has opened up, but you really have to have the right information. The first time you say UFOs or aliens or things like that, they shut down. And I saw that at the citizens hearing for disclosure. And I have to say that I walked in, pretty excited to be there, and I left completely changed. And I saw where exactly this had to go. Steve started all of this, all of it. And I thought it was probably one of the most effective things that has ever been done in our field up to that point. And I saw the successes, and this is why we have a To the Stars today. This is why we have, doors opening. We had professional people, professional researchers and investigators talking to people that were very polite on Monday. They were paid well, and they should have been. But they were being very polite. And by Wednesday, they got it. By Friday, they were helping. Many amazing good things happened, especially to one of our veterans who deserved the kind of assistance he got, which is now spilling over to many others. So, what happened at that citizens hearing?
You're talking about John Burroughs from the Rendlesham case there, correct, Chase?
I absolutely am, yes. The fact that these guys that work these top secret programs or work into these top secret, and I have children who were spec ops. So, when they're in these situations and something happens to them long term because of that, and because it's classified, it didn't happen. Bull crap. These are veterans. Oh, don't even get me started on that one. But I don't want to digress a little. But honestly, Steve, to me, has handed UFOs, the UFO field, one of our best foundations. I think he re-cemented our next level and raised the bar. And I believe that in cooperation with To the Stars Academy, that this is just going to go forward. I can't wait for Steve to get here. We've got work to do. It's really, I don't agree with the joining other organizations as much as I agree with joining and helping you, Steve, get here.
Well, I'm not an organizer. Well, thank you, Chase. You're officially hired as my public relations person and chief fundraiser.
I have been saying this for years. I was completely changed walking out of there. I knew you had just raised the bar, and I had to get better. I had to be a better investigator. I had to be, specialize in evidence, because that's something I knew that this is, we have 10,000 stories, hundreds and thousands of reports all over the world. What we need is evidence, and we need the right witnesses that our lawmakers are comfortable with. They know these guys. So when you're presenting a military member or a pilot, they know what their training is, especially right through, it's just they know these. So I just thought it was the first time that in a long time that ufology was given a brand new foundation to stand on, and it raised the bar to the point where some people didn't make it. Just saying.
I had wanted to do that for 11 years, and the money to do it turned up. I almost out of nowhere, and we did it. And the citizen hearing, as far as I was concerned, was the most important event in the history of the disclosure process up to that date. Now that has been supplanted by the launching of the To the Stars Academy. That is now the most important event in the history of the disclosure process. In terms of lobbying, I'm going to make a very key point here. One of the one of the challenges that I had when I entered the field in 96 and registered as a lobbyist was by 96, the Congress was starting to descend into, it was going over to the dark side. all right, and becoming increasingly dysfunctional. And ultimately became like a giant block of cement. You could walk up to it and tap it. That's about all you could do. The only way, you had to have money. You had, in other words, you had to have huge amounts of money that would be your sledgehammer, and then you could break through, and then they'd listen to you. And then they wouldn't do anything anyways. The Congress just collapsed. It is now a fully dysfunctional part of our government, and it needs to fix itself pretty damn quickly, or there will be consequences. So I knew that was going to be tough. So I concentrated on lobbying the political media, which is really where a lot of the stuff really happens, not necessarily in the Congress. Congress kind of finishes it off, but issues they flourish in the political media. And I had a lot of success there. I've generated huge numbers of articles. I don't know how many. There's been over 400 just written that have referenced what I do, and PRG, over 400. All the big papers. Okay, fine. And then generated other stuff. So that's not the same thing as getting government to specifically do what you want it to do. Now things have changed, and we have a new group lobbying Congress, but they're not some individual unpaid citizen science or citizen activist. They are insiders with substantial resumes, careers. They are involved in a program which is implicitly backed by the Department of Defense. Implicitly backed by the Department of Defense. They're in a whole nother world. I'm not in that world because I spent the first half of my life mostly just playing tennis and screwing around, and so I don't have that resume. Okay, no problem. And they're meeting with people on the Hill, and they're going to continue to do that. And that is lobbying. And maybe somebody will maybe they may very well register, if they haven't already, to the Stars Academy as a lobbyist organization, so that they don't upset anybody. But they're going to be lobbying. But let's be clear. They are lobbying on behalf of the military intelligence complex. The TTSA was, if among other things, a public relations maneuver by the military intelligence complex. Now, they're not going to admit this. And if they want to challenge me on this, that's okay. If they can persuade me, no, it's not the case. I'll speak differently. But the military intelligence complex has known eventually disclosure was going to come. And when it came, the politicians, once they make the announcement, were going to then throw the entire MIC under the bus. They're going to blame them for everything. Reason we couldn't tell you sooner, they stonewalled all the presidents. We the politicians wanted to bring the truth to you. We're the great truth bringers, and the DOD and all its black programs and everything else basically stood in our way. And they didn't like that. They don't view themselves as the villains. They don't view themselves as criminals. They view themselves as national security protectors, and they've done a pretty good job. They've made some pretty big mistakes, but overall, they've protected us pretty well, including not having a nuclear war, though we still may have one. The point is that they see themselves as that way, and I don't argue with that. So this program, which now puts them out in front with identified people from the MIC, bringing out information, going on television, they're now ahead of the politicians, right? We have 123 people running for the Democratic nomination. How many of them have actually brought this issue up yet? No, none of them. Hillary Clinton
my understanding that one of them did take a meeting about it when they were in Nevada, though. When they were in Vegas.
I think Yang said something. He was asked something by Damon Steer up in New Hampshire, and he said a little something, not much. Let's just say they're not exactly jumping on board. So they're now way ahead of them. And Hillary Clinton's keeping silent. She's keeping silent for reasons I'm pretty sure I know what they are. But she did speak to it. She had no choice. I forced her. That's why I'm never going to get a Christmas card from
Steve, do you care to discuss what your theories is on the reasons?
Okay. I'll get back to that. Let me just finish this other thread, and I'll get right back to that. So and I don't blame them for doing that. They want to be viewed as remember, the disclosure event will be the most profound event in human history. I don't know how many thousands of books will be written about it, but it's a lot. Everybody attached to it or attached to the history behind it will be vetted by historians for the next hundreds of years. And they want to try to position America's defense military intelligence complex as being on the right side of this and trying to help as we finally get to the point where we've got to move forward. They're on the right side of it, and lobbying on Congress, going up there, helping to get hearings, whatever, is definitely going to help that, and that's great. However, I don't represent the military intelligence complex. Chase doesn't represent the military intelligence complex. We are citizen activists, lobbyists. We represent the American people's interest. And the American people's interest may not coincide with the military intelligence complex interest in all ways. In fact, it won't. I'm not saying that's an awful thing. I'm simply saying that's a certainty. And so who is representing their interest? Now, it may be that after disclosure, you're going to have people coming forward funding high-end K Street lobbying firms who send out people to Congress who wouldn't know a flying saucer from a Boston cream pie, and they're up there, and nobody could care less about the people that were doing it now, meaning me, meaning Chase and others. But maybe not. So I'm going back to Washington if I can get the money, so that I can start lobbying again under this new situation, as Chase has pointed out, where it's going to be a little easier maybe for me to maybe get beyond just an intern in terms of taking my having initial discussion, or maybe not. I don't know. But clearly it's a little different. But mostly I'm coming back to also lobby the political media, and that I can do. I know what to do there. And the reason why is simply this, that somebody must represent the public's interest here, because I can assure you that the shifts that are going to come from the disclosure event, and maybe some things leading up to it, are tectonic. And there are big, powerful interests and powerful entities that have interest in outcomes that are going to want to steer things in certain directions in order to benefit them, and not necessarily the American people's interest. And so the message I have is, who out there amongst the space billionaires, Elon Musk or Branson or even Bezos, whatever, are willing to fund the people's interest in this after disclosure, or maybe even fund the people's interest in this leading up to disclosure, right? Because that's going to have to be represented. And that's why I'm going back. And so that's the difference. And I think Chase understands this as well. There's going to be two parallel lobbying efforts. One is going to be the public lobbying, and there's going to be the MIC lobbying in service to what they feel needs to happen. And that's a big deal, and it's not easy to explain it, and most people don't understand that yet. Hopefully they will soon.
And getting back to your theories on Hillary Clinton's kind of sitting on the sidelines, at least at the moment.
Here is my statement, and I'm sticking to it. All right. And since I was in Washington for 2 years, totally embroiled in this, Hillary Clinton wanted to be the first woman president. There's no question about that. And she wanted to be president. But the first woman president was an even bigger prize. She knew about the ET issue. She was involved in the Rockefeller initiative. She knew how the Air Force lied to her husband, came up with that stupid mogul balloon report that spent $12 million on, and shut it down. They had to then back away because they knew that at that time, 97 and forward, that this issue was still radioactive, and they all had political aspirations. And so they went silent, except for Podesta. He's the one that kept poking his head up and occasionally say something. It's like he was leaving breadcrumbs. And they stayed silent because she's going to become president one day. She thought she was going to become president in 2008. She really did. And if she had, I think we would have had disclosure. And I think that Podesta's statements in 2002, 2003, his cooperation with Leslie Kean, and all of that was just prelude to and setting the stage for her to come out and say, hey, guess what? You know something about this. Time to tell the people the truth. Go to the Pentagon, say, boys, mostly boys, is a new woman in town. And I'm the president now. You stonewall my husband, you're not stonewalling me. We're going to get the files out. We're going to announce the ET presence. And if you don't agree with that, I'm firing all of you, and I'll replace you. Right? And that would have been it. She didn't win. And so we had a complex situation that unraveled over the next 8 years, and then she had her second shot. Now, I pushed the ET issue on them. I forced them to come out of cover. They didn't want to. The truth is, it didn't cost them a vote. And I emailed Podesta this. I email Podesta from time to time. I never get a response. I don't expect to. But I basically said, look, this didn't cost you a vote. In fact, you had no blowback at all. And if you had embraced it all the way, if you'd gone all the way and said, look, this is what's going on, we need to tell the people the truth. If I'm president, we're going to do so. And if Barack wants to do it, I totally support it, whatever. She would have changed the subject completely away from all of the other crap that was being thrown up in the air. And the focus would have been on her and this issue, and she would be president today. But she did not have the courage to do that. So she plays it out, and she loses. And now she's sitting on all this information that she's totally connected to the issue. She could have given an interview to Maureen Dowd at the New York Times the day after the election if she wanted to, or certainly any time in 2017 or 2018. But had she done so, and believe me, she could drop an interview on the New York Times, it would be a total nuclear bomb. Disclosure would happen. And guess who would be the disclosure president? A gentleman by the name of Trump, who I'm pretty sure Hillary Clinton hates with a white-hot heat that can only be obtained in certain special nuclear reactor cores. And so she has remained silent. And that's the reason.
I would say that is a very plausible scenario.
Put my money. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to debate me, if I'm paid
okay.
well, I'll show up.
Yeah, speculation is okay, but good speculation is very much okay, and I would basically concur with that. That makes a lot of sense to me. Although I guess we'll never really know for sure unless she writes a book.
We're going to know that. That's all going to be. Eventually, they're going to tell the whole story. They're going to want to. They're going to. I know that Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, John Podesta, and maybe Panetta and some of the others are eventually going to tell the whole story. Once it's okay. Once, they're not going to be president. Politics are over. This issue's out there. That's history. This is unbelievably important history, and they're going to want to tell it. And the historians are going to want to read it and write it. I mean, they're going to research it so that everybody's going to tell their place in all of this. This is where he was. This is what I said. Did. Couldn't do this. Couldn't do that. That was the plan. Whatever. Wish maybe the public could have learned sooner. Didn't happen. But they're not going to want to go silent. This is the biggest history of all time. This is going to be the biggest event in human history. Maybe succeeded by open contact if the ETs decide to go CNN, right? But up until then, that's the biggest in history. And I assure you, everybody involved is going to want to be in the history books. Everybody, even the debunkers. They're going to want to be in there. Don't forget me. I pissed all over it for years and years and years, but I was paying attention, and I know a lot about the subject. And I had a good reason. Whatever, they're all going to want to be in history books. So don't worry, it's all going to be covered.
I saw that CNN dusted off and wheeled out Bill Nye recently to, give his perspective on all this. So that was.
I sent a tweet to Bill. I said, Bill, you were doing so well on the climate change thing, really having some impact. And then you decide to dip back into the ET issue again. Don't do that, Bill. But what can you say?
Well, Steve, we talked a little bit earlier about the Admiral Wilson notes, the Admiral Wilson documents, and we were able to follow up on that. I don't know if you want to hang around when I go through what we've turned up in the last week or so since we did the show with Michael Hall. If you and Chase still on the line, if you want to hang around and listen in on that, I mean, obviously you're more than welcome to. But we do want to get to that. But before we do, is there anything else that you want to wrap up with?
Oh, yes. You're saying you want to wrap us up, and then you're gonna do a kind of some stuff about the
unless you want to listen in and take part as well.
Yeah.
I have something as well.
Well, go ahead.
Rich Hoffman wanted to ask Chase, are you as lobbyists leveraging Harry Reid or others who are having success in getting political traction?
Chase, you there?
Yeah.
I can also read the entire question for you if you want.
Yeah, because honestly,
The
my answer
context.
that right.
Yeah, I'll read the context of it. It's a little long. Might take like 1 full minute or so, but I'll read it, okay? Okay,
Go ahead.
so it's political. It's the same thing I said to you, Steve, which has like 11 questions in it. But then she might get the gist of it and decide which questions she wants to answer. So Rich Hoffman said, political lobbying is a good thing. We need to have people like Harry Reid who value the scientific study to help make a change in the attitudes of more than just the Navy or the Department of Defense to tackle this. The FAA needs to get involved and commercial pilots to report. We need to also have academia remove their obstructions in allowing students to study this and publish papers. We need to get NASA to alter their attitude. If you want a holistic perspective on this, the attitudes of government overall needs to be altered. How are you going about doing this, Chase?
I think Steve answered it perfectly, and it's really where we're going. It's kind of baby steps. So before we really address academia, and we have to hit that disclosure part before we start really being activist and pushing forward on post. We need to start it now. I understand that, but right now that momentum is just riding in and getting things done. Who would have thought 2 years ago that our military would be openly changing policy so that our military soldiers and active duty members could report without ridicule and have that report taken seriously. So that's going to be classified, that whole process, by the way, and I don't think people realize that. But this is just, we just started, and I think very few of us saw this really coming from To the Stars. I really saw this coming in different avenues, but so be it. Let's go and be part of the solution. And but I do agree. Once this goes through and things are acknowledged, and then it's time. And like Steve said, everyone's going to be jumping on a bandwagon. So it's going to be the Wild West for a little bit until things settle down. Much like, typing in the word UFO when you're a first-time person looking for, real information on the topic on the internet. Poor guys, they're just thrown into this, swamp. So it's going to be interesting, but we're going to need people to stand up and be ready for that. Rich Hoffman is the perfect person. His scientific coalition, focused on that. And I agree with that. If it's not admissible, scientific, or evidence, I don't need it. We don't need it anymore. I mean, we have other places. MUFON is amazing at being the historians and the archivists and getting all those, keeping all those eyewitness statements. That's amazing. But we need other things done. And now we need evidence. It's the only thing that's going to push through.
Okay, and I'll just ask this last part so Frank can move on. And that is considering, and this is still Rich, considering it is indeed a worldwide phenomenon, and that now we have openly stated our position to the world, would now be the time to have the UN tackle this? What is the response on a world level to our announcements? Well, would
No
now
chance.
be the time to have the UN tackle this?
No chance. Not going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, theoretically it is, but the UN is not going to do that.
Correct.
And I don't even bother with it, basically. The UN is out of the game. It's
Correct.
been out of the game for some time. That's intentional. Now, post-disclosure, the UN is immediately the logical choice for, how would you say, having discussions about, okay, there's extraterrestrials here. Let's get together and talk about that, right? What do you think, Senegal? What do you think, India? And maybe the UN might emerge post-disclosure as the acknowledged entity for addressing all the global implications of the ET presence, which is a big deal without question, or maybe not. The UN has been so bastardized. The structure is wrong. The whole Security Council is wrong. That was designed as a Cold War buffer. That's not good. That needs to be done away with. And it's been underfunded. The building is a wreck. It's just a mess. because we don't really want to cooperate with each other. What we really want is to just kick the hell out of each other, and or at least there's enough leaders of that frame of mind. We keep putting people in power who are sociopaths, who have no interest in cooperating in a global way. All they want to do is make money and kill people. And so the UN is just not servicing them, and so it's very unlikely it may be in that role, but it could be. What is more likely is that a brand new organization with massive funding will be created from the ground up, post-disclosure, to be the source point for the development of the plans and agendas and protocols for open contact, which I think is going to be on the minds of everybody. Because let's face it, if ETs are here, which they are, and we fully acknowledge it globally, the likelihood of them coming out in the open is great and could happen at any time. And so there may be a ground-up organization built from scratch, and that may be the best way to go. Unless we're going to fight over it for endlessly for years, that may happen. Or maybe the UN will be that. I don't know. But as far as right now, UN is utterly useless except for a few minor occasional kerfuffles.
Would you ever, if you had the opportunity to be in this position, it's just a hypothetical, Chase or yourself, put the National Academy of Sciences in charge of studying extraterrestrials for a governmental body?
No, they're going to have to create a whole new one. The national, it's
Correct.
Too big, way too big. This is
Correct.
Yeah, there's going to be a whole department of extraterrestrial studies. There's going to be a cabinet position built from scratch, new people. And the question is, how quickly do they get there? I'm sure the National Academy will immediately raise his hand and say, "Oh yeah, we're it," right? NASA will say, "Oh no, we're it. You want to put it here, right?" Or the National Science Foundation. Everybody's going to want to be the home for the engagement from the United States on this subject. And I think, but probably the best way to go is to start brand new with a new entity, so that nobody is everybody. That's the fairest way to go about this, and start from scratch. Because we're in a new world. This is a totally new world, and we don't want to. We want to try to bring as much new ideas and structure to it as possible.
Okay, Frank. I apologize. Thank you so much for your time on that.
Yeah, we do want to get. We've done some follow up. As far as I know, we're the really the only ones following up on the contents of the actual documents that were released late the earlier week, and. We've been digging in. I see a lot of other researchers going on about the provenance of the docs. Now, Stephen Chase, you're more than happy to, if you want to hang around, you want to listen. But I've got some visuals as well to go along with this, and I would like to get into it in some detail. Found some additional information, which I think is quite interesting. It doesn't prove anything one way or the other, but I think the most interesting thing that I found goes to page 5 on those documents, where it is mentioned TW, his reasoning for being purportedly in Las Vegas, came to test the site special area to wrap up projects. He began in 98. Successor can't be bothered with right now, so on and so forth. Did a tour, said goodbye. A trip set up by NNSA, National Nuclear Security Agency. Rich and Doug, I've got a pretty good idea who I think Rich is. He might be an interesting person to follow up with. You, meaning Eric Davis, know them. AFIO members. Now, the AFIO is the Association of Former Intelligence Officers, and rather interestingly, I don't think this proves anything one way or the other, but rather interesting, Eric Davis, per his biography at the EarthTech site, the organization run by Hal Puthoff, in his biography it is mentioned that he is a member of the Association of Former Intelligence Officers. So that's a little bit of follow-up that we did that I think is interesting. Like I said, it doesn't prove anything one way or the other, but it is interesting. So there's that. And also, I did want to make clear one of the reasons I have strong suspicions about the notes aspect of these documents. And this goes back to what was reported that Commander Miller found most interesting. This was a problem. Another problem I had. Again, Admiral Wilson saying that he met with this Watch Committee, the gatekeepers. This ties back to, I went through a lot of this in detail with when I had Michael on, so I'm not going to belabor this point. And it's also something I brought up when we had Michael on, Michael Hall, that is, in March, before these even came out. There were some things that I suggested should be warning signs as to the authenticity of these documents, and a lot of that proved out. A lot of that showed up in the documents. That was one of them. The fact that it was promoted as a transcript of sorts. It was really more a case of notes rather than an actual transcript. But in the Serpo material, which everybody knows that's disinfo, a fictional story, and this same sort of plot device. There's no one specifically named who briefs the president. It's the caretaker. Here, it's for Admiral Wilson. It is the gatekeepers. It reads like a device, a fictional device to me. So again, that's not proof, but it's in my opinion. And then, of course, there is Admiral Wilson on the left in this particular image, Commander Edgar Mitchell and Commander Miller, and they were at that meeting. Nobody questions the authenticity of the meeting in the Pentagon involving these three gentlemen, plus Stephen Greer, plus some others, where the ET issue was brought up. The discrepancy there, and Commander Miller and Admiral Wilson both on record as saying that there really was no follow-up. Obviously, a lot of other people are saying otherwise, so there's that. And also, this is not the first time. We talked a little bit about this with Steve earlier on regarding a meeting between Stephen Greer and then CIA Director James Woolsey. And there was some disagreement. The meeting was acknowledged by everyone involved, but the contents of the meeting were in some dispute. And in fact, Woolsey and a person who set this meeting up, John Peterson, both going on record, and their wives going on record signing a statement. Well, it wasn't that big a deal. We were just being polite. We listened to Greer. But Peterson is an involved guy, an insider. I found out enough about that particular incident that on a scale of 1 to 10, with the Peterson-Woolsey side being 1 and the Greer side being 10, I would kind of give this, and I think conservatively, maybe like a 7.5 to an 8, that it was much closer to what Greer said. So there's some precedence for this kind of thing, and again, these are the key points from Commander Miller. Another suggestion I have, and I think it's really important, there's a couple of things. One, you've got to be able to place Wilson in Vegas on this particular date. He doesn't live in Vegas, but you've got to at least place him there. You don't have to get him on record saying, yes, everything happened exactly the way that these notes describe. He's not going to do that. I think everybody understands that. But, was he there? I mean, that's really the key. If he wasn't there, that's obviously a real problem for these notes, these documents. If he was, it makes things a lot more interesting. And then again, here's a screenshot of the response to Richard Dolan from Hal Puthoff that let's see, we believe it is in the best interest of the USG, meaning the U.S. government, and ourselves not to comment on any documents that purport to describe classified USG programs or information. So there's that. And a key word in there is purport. I don't think you can go ahead and say everybody who goes on record and says there's a problem here is lying. I don't think you can go out there and say everybody who offers up a no comment is really saying yes. So I think there's a problem with that. And that's basically the update that we've got, and obviously we're continuing to dig in, and we'll when we get stuff, no matter which way it cuts, we're going to go with it. So that's basically that.
I'd like to go ahead and bring up that word purport, because everybody's going over this document with a fine-tooth comb, so I might as well bring up one word, and that is the word purport means appear to claim to be or do something especially falsely. And it's important that people understand that it means to pretend or claim to do something falsely. And that is the reason why Hal used that word. Otherwise, if he didn't want to use it, he wouldn't have actually taken the time to put that in his sort of no comment. So I don't think people are actually noticing that word.
Yeah, and there was some... Oh, go ahead.
When people write a public comment that they know the whole world is going to read and scrutinize heavily. I think that it's important to understand that this individual, Hal, knew that the implication or the intention or meaning or the significance of what he was writing was going to be taken apart. And so that is why he used that word.
Okay, and also Billy Cox, who had followed up when the initial known meeting came into public light back in the late 2000s. He had followed up with Admiral Wilson, who denied basically what was at that point the Greer and Mitchell account of what happened in the aftermath of the known meeting. And he also followed up with To the Stars. He spoke to Chris Mellon, and Mellon, declined to comment on the specifics, but couldn't resist weighing in on a scenario that a single defense contractor could have blocked Wilson's access to an SAP. This is what Mellon stated to Cox, direct quote, when we do ambitious stuff at DoD, there is never ever only one contractor, a lead contractor, sure, but always a consortium or subs under a lead, perhaps grounds to doubt the veracity of the document than A. So he went a little bit further. He went a little bit further than Hal Puthoff did to Richard Dolan, and looks like he followed up. No, I'm sorry. That is something else. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so yeah, that's basically what Mellon said in response to Billy Cox on all this. So this is where we're at now. I do think there are plenty of leads, and again, I don't think that the idea of tracking down the provenance, the chain of custody, what hands this doc may or may not have gone through, even if it ended up in the hands of Edgar Mitchell. There are forgeries in art museums all over the world. Just last year, a museum in France, it turned out that half of the paintings they had in their museum were in fact forgeries. So, but there is stuff to follow around. Okay, we've got Miller on the record saying what he said. We've got Davis with his no comment, followed up by Puthoff with somewhat more detailed no comment. And we've got Wilson, who no one has contacted yet. But again, there are other things. Again, this Association of Former Intelligence Officers, that's a lead. That can be followed up on. That might cut the other way, that maybe this meeting did happen. I'm still highly skeptical, but again, that's a lead. Follow up on the contents of the notes, not after the notes were drawn up, either legitimately or not. That doesn't mean anything, okay, to be honest about it. It really doesn't. The notes were either made up or they're not. Okay, there's only two things that are possible here. They're legitimate or they aren't. And also, we see 15 pages of purported writing from Eric Davis. And Eric Davis has a lot of other known writing samples. Are there quirks in that writing? Are there some unusual things in there that might indicate that he did, in fact, write those notes? Follow up on that. Take a look. Take a closer look at that. So there are a lot of leads here, a lot of things to look at. We're continuing to do that, and I suggest that other researchers do the same. And there's plenty to go on. There's no shortage to go on. So having said all that, we gave our little update. We had a great interview with Steve Bassett, and thanks to Chase Klutsky for joining in. And hey, so we're ready to wrap this up. We're ready to go. I thought we had a great show. And any final words, Chant?
Yeah, I'd like to say that I have done more research, and I will be bringing that out regarding the topic that we're talking about here later. I haven't decided when, but I know that you and I will get together and decide at what point we'll go ahead and have that show.
Yeah, and one final thing, because it's been pointed out that obviously Commander Miller did express a lot of skepticism about the notes, and also said that he did not, did not write that letter in the form it's being presented. Excuse me. One thing, and this was the key question that I wanted to ask him, and I made the point Tuesday, and I want to make it again. I don't think that this is a point that anybody is debating, that Commander Miller is a plugged-in, smart guy who knows UFOs. And I don't think for a second, and that's why I asked him this first, I don't think for a second that if he had the opportunity to ask this contractor who basically holds the key to all knowledge about the extraterrestrial presence, I don't think what he'd be asking him is about the Socorro case. And the Socorro case in conjunction with the Holloman Air Force Base case, and I still have a problem with it. And let's see somebody who thinks these notes are legitimate address that. And let's see them follow up and take a closer look at some known writing samples from Eric Davis. And let's see some people follow up on this Association of Former Intelligence Officers. And I'm done. Let's get out of here. All right?
Okay, well, I just wanted to thank our wonderful guest, Stephen Bassett, for coming on, and look forward to interviewing him again, because I know that there's going to be more subjects that we'll be able to cover with him. And I just wanted to ask, Steve, will you be able to do that perhaps maybe sometime this year? I think your mic is muted.
He muted his mic.
Yeah.
So, let's
I'm
wrap.
back.
Okay.
I'm back. Yeah, look, yes, again, a lot of things are about to unfold. Pretty sure the next two, we're only, what is today? Over the next 10 days, no, wait a minute, it's Friday. Yeah, you're going to have two more unidentifieds you're going to air. I expect some strong stuff coming out of there. And probably Trump's statement is going to ignite a few things. We'll see what happens. So the developments are moving fast. So give me a call. I can come on short notice if necessary.
Great. Okay. Yeah. That we can roll. There's no time slot. Really, pretty much any time, day or night, we can roll. We can do something. So
we also
we're like a MASH unit, mobile. We can move.
We also have a show at the end of the year, which Stephen is absolutely invited to. And we have quite a few high-profile folks in the UFO community who will be on this mega panel, which is to review the entire year of 2019 regarding all current events.
Cool. Send me the time and date on that, and I'll be there.
It'll be the first Sunday of December at noon.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Ooh, it's almost my birthday.
That could be an 8-hour show. You never know.
Okay. All right. Gotta go, guys. Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it, Steve. Thanks a lot, everybody. And we'll have more as news breaks. We're going to stay on it. So thanks a lot for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your Father's Day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.